It has been almost a year now since the latest mainline Final Fantasy had been released. Final Fantasy XVI was a game that was fairly mixed within the fanbase, but one that was still met with critical acclaim. This is one of Square Enix's main developers, formerly known as Creative Business Unit 3, now known as Creative Studio 3. They are the team responsible for the popular MMO Final Fantasy XIV, and of course most recently with Final Fantasy XVI. The head of that team, Yoshi-P, was recently interviewed during a Dawn Trail media tour that went over the current state of their studio, as well as what the future of Final Fantasy has in store, as not only does he hint at one project being in development, but two that are seemingly very close to an announcement. So, of course, if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for anything JRPG. Now, this interview comes from GamerNL with a question that starts off by saying, when we spoke last year before Final Fantasy XVI was released, you were juggling two big games at the same time. Can you relax a bit more now that you're working on 14 alone? With Yoshi-P saying, as you can probably tell from me, it hasn't really gotten easier. I think it's even harder now. With Final Fantasy XVI, I was not the director, but the producer, and I think that job is a lot easier. With Final Fantasy XIV, we are now working on the expansion, but at the same time, I am also looking to the future. After 10 years, we now really have to start thinking about the next big step. There are many different plans that I have a lot of meetings about. Moreover, this expansion becomes more complex as we introduce a major graphical upgrade, and I completely understand what he's saying here. To not only have to produce, but to direct an online MMO on the scale of Final Fantasy XIV is no small matter, and it's not easy, as Yoshi-P has stressed numerous times. Endwalker was an expansion that ended a storyline that spanned 10 years of development, and with each coming expansion they have to somehow exceed expectations every single time. And while he has stressed the hardships that came with 16's development, including trying to create something new within a fanbase that has so many different tastes and expectations, it seems that only applies even more so to a game like 14. An MMO is constantly developing, and again, it has to meet those expectations of the fans, as previous 14 expansions have already brought this game to such a high standard, especially with Dawn Trail being a start to a new saga. It has to create a good first impression. Unlike any other MMO on the market, 14 really puts an emphasis on story. Of course, this game being a part of this franchise means that you kinda expect to have an unforgettable narrative. And after the major success of both Shadowbringers and Endwalker, I think they are well aware that it is very important to keep that same quality of storytelling. They then go on to say, speaking of the board of directors, last year you said you hated that part of your job. Have you gotten in trouble for saying that? No, I don't really get into trouble easily, because even if I don't like something, they know that I will always do my best, even though deep down I would prefer to work on the development side all day long. Listen, love or hate the guy, you have to admit that Yoshi-P's dedication to his work and transparency is second to none. I mean, this is a guy who saved a dying MMO and turned it into one of Square Enix's biggest moneymakers of today. And to be completely real, I think Yoshi-P is one of the most honest game devs in the industry right now. His dedication to the fans and the community is always apparent. He almost never fails to tell the community about any potential problems and how and when they're gonna fix it. It's because of his leadership that CS3 has gained that reputation of being one of the most transparent game devs around. It is something that should be a standard in today's industry, but unfortunately that is just not the case. Now they then ask Yoshi-P about the current state of CS3 within Square Enix, and this answer is what I think a lot of people will be happy to hear. here. They ask, a major reorganization recently took place within Square Enix. Has that had any influence on your team? One thing that has changed, our name used to be Creative Business Unit 3. It has now become Creative Studio 3. Besides that, absolutely nothing has changed. I haven't had to fire any people and the current team is unchanged. We're even in the process of hiring new staff. The company has high expectations for our division. It is one of the pillars of Square Enix. There is no chance that they will cut or invest less with us. We will continue to work hard on the game so players don't have to worry. We're also working on games that haven't been announced yet. Given how the team is structured, we can't work on a lot of games at the same time, but we'll continue to do our best. There may be some announcements soon about 2 new games that we're working on. As said by Yoshi-P, they are one of the main pillars of Square Enix. Not only that, they are the developers of the most profitable Final Fantasy in the franchise. I believe it was all the way back in October when Yoshi-P spoke about already working on their next project. And this was just a few months after Final Fantasy XVI had just been released. So the fact that it's not only one game, but 2 games that are in development is very interesting to hear. The most logical answer that I can come up with is Final Fantasy IX Remake, as not only are those rumors resurfacing again, how the game was outsourced and then brought in-house to be developed. So it is a possibility that CS3 could have taken over the project. Another possibility that I think CS3 could be working on is an entirely new IP. Yoshi-P has stressed numerous times how restricted it could feel when working on a new Final Fantasy title. CS3 is such a talented studio that honestly would kind of be ashamed to see them just work on Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy alone. To be able to make your own game with no boundaries, but to just be free to do whatever you want without any expectations of the fanbase. And I think at this point, Yoshi-P definitely deserves to direct his own single-player AAA game in his vision. Final Fantasy Tactics was also on the Nvidia leak listings that we saw a handful of years ago. And thanks to Midori, we also know that the Tactics remaster is in development. FF14 and 16 also had developers from the team of Tactics. So I think, if anything, the game going to CS3 here makes the most sense. Now, the most unlikely prediction here is Final Fantasy 17. However, going off of the track record for the mainline Final Fantasy games, we'd be waiting another 5 to 6 years just for the next entry. With the combination of 14 Dawntrail as well as these next 2 upcoming games, Creative Studio 3 is looking like they are going to be as busy as ever. Before Final Fantasy XVI released, Yoshi-P stressed that if he was ever a part of a single-player Final Fantasy, that it would go back to its traditional fantasy setting. And he stuck to his word. 16 went back to the crystals, kingdoms, and more focus on summons. And now post Final Fantasy XVI, he says he wants to try something more lighthearted for his next project. I mean, you gotta admire the man for trying everything. And if it's one team that you can count on for a quality and memorable experience, it is Creative Studio 3. So whether these next new projects are related to Final Fantasy or not will have to be seen. But I have a feeling that this team is just getting started.